Hello TaleForgers, in this video we'll be implementing dead zones based on player collisions. So without further ado, let's dive in and see how it's done. First of all, let's create a materials folder. Inside, create new material and name it dead zone. Let's select surface type transparent and disable receive shadows. Now all you need to do is to change the color to red and set the alpha channel to about half the range, so that the dead zones do not cover the game background. Next, let's create a 3D object, a quad, name it dead zone, reset transform, and of course remove the mesh collider. Let's drag and drop dead zone material to mesh renderer, add the physics shape and physics body components. Let's set the physics body to static. Now configure the physics shape, set Z size to 1 and let's add new tag dead zone to physics category names. Change the collision filter belongs to dead zone, collides with player. After all necessary operations, let's create a prefab from this game object. In addition, let's add dead zone as a collides with parameter for the player prefab. We can then arrange the dead zones on the scene. Let's create a new dead zones empty game object and place two zones in it. Let's set the scale to 50, 40, 1, so non-uniform scale, which will be baked to the component data. And let's set the position manually. I will do it in fast forward. You can pause the video and move the boxes around as you like. Okay, so what's my idea for implementing this? We have a whole system responsible for checking if a player collides with the ground. I think it would be useful to use this system and extend it to check if we collide with dead zones. If so, we'll display a debug log. First, we need to open PlayerGroundComponentData and add two collision filters to filter the collision check for the ground and dead zone layers. Next, in PlayerGroundAuthoring, let's add 4 new serialized fields, 2 for the dead zone collision parameters belongs to and collides with, and the other 2 for the ground. I'm using PhysicsCategoryTags for the fields, so I will be able to easily change the parameters in the editor, without having to beat shift. Let's create 2 getters for dead zone and ground. Create new collision filters and within them we refer to the related belongs to and collides with, and call value after the dot operator, because the collision filter parameters takes an unsigned int values, not the physics category tags. The return time is of course collision filter. At the very end of the class, we'll pass parameters to PlayerGroundComponentData. In the PlayerGroundAspect, let's add read-only getters to retrieve collision filter values from component data and use them in the system. Let's add a new field, private collision filter, dead zone collision filter, and pass it and ground collision filter in onStartRunning. In PlayerGroundJob, let's add 2 parameters for collision filter and pass them in onUpdate when creating the job. Before we go any further, we need to add a new flag to PlayerComponentData, which will determine whether the player is dead. So next, in PlayerAspect, let's add an IsDead property that references PlayerComponentData. Also replace the read-only access with a read-write access. So let's back to PlayerGroundSystem. Let's create a new overlap box method with the BestCompile attribute that returns a true-false value and takes the following parameters: player transform, box geometry, ref native list distance hits, and collision filter. Then let's write return collision word.overlap box pass player transfer.position plus overlap detection offset new quaternion 0001 box geometry.size divided by 2 ref hits collision filter. We will be executing this method twice, once for the dead zone check and once for the ground. Let's remove the isGrounded check for now and write bool isDead equals overlap box player transform box geometry ref hits dead zone collision filter. PlayerAspect.isDead equals isDead. If isDead, then debug.log dead to the console, and of course don't forget hits.dispose. Return. We need to implement similar code for the isGrounded check, except that we will pass the ground collision filter. Additionally, let's add an if isGrounded check and display a message in the console. Okay, that's it for coding. Let's go back to Unity, wait for the compilation to finish, and go to Systems on the ECS scene. Select PlayerGround and set all the necessary parameters. Attention! These collision filters are set from the perspective of the player making collisions with dead zone and ground. So for dead zone belongs to player collides with dead zone. For ground belongs to player collides with ground. Alright, all set, so let's hit play and jump to the dead zone. Voila, we got a debug.log in the console. Great job! In the next video, we'll focus on UI so that we can see on-screen information about a player failure. I invite you to support us on Patreon. Any support is really appreciated. On Patreon, I share materials in advance and add various useful code snippets. Nice to have you with us. Thank you for your engagement. Until next time.